We're starting off the day with two really, really terrific authors, Vera Kurian and Ashley Winstead. Vera is a writer and scientist based in Washington, D.C. Her debut novel, Never Saw It Coming, was published by Park Row Books and Harville Secker Vintage in the UK in September. Her short fiction has been published in magazines such as Glimmer Train, Day One, and The Pinch. She has a PhD in social psychology, where she studied intergroup relations, ideology, and quantitative methods. That sounds like a perfect background for thrillers. Ashley Winstead is the author of In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, Fool Me Once, and the forthcoming thriller, The Last Housewife. A graduate of Vanderbilt University with a PhD in English from Southern Methodist University. She's worked in academia, the music industry, the entertainment industry, and philanthropy. I loved both of these books. If you haven't read them, you're in for a treat. If you have read them, don't tell who did it, right? So our moderator today is Allison Leotta, another fantastic author. Allison is a novelist, former sex crimes prosecutor, and TV critic who focuses on what TV crime drama gets right and gets wrong. I love police procedurals, so that could be a day in and of itself. So, excuse me. Allison served as the Assistant U.S. Attorney in Washington before turning to fiction. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School and Michigan State University. She's been dubbed, I love this quote, she's been dubbed the female John Grisham, but her goal is for Grisham to be dubbed the male Allison Leotta. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Great. We're so excited to be back in Gaithersburg in person with book lovers. So thank you for everything you do to make this happen. We love this book festival. And I'm super excited to be here today with two of the hottest new mystery authors to break into the scene this year. Two debut authors who've had the kind of success that everyone who writes a novel hopes to have. Vera Kurian, your debut novel is Never Saw Me Coming. I'm going to have you hold it up so people can take their picture of you with it. There, lovely. It was named a most anticipated novel of 2021 by Newsweek, Goodreads, Pop Sugar, and Crime Reads. And you were nominated for the most prestigious award in the mystery writing community, the Edgar Award. Congratulations. And Ashley, your debut novel, In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. Please, your close up. It got the coveted rave review in the New York Times. It is currently an Amazon editor's pick, and you have over 24,000 reviews on Goodreads. So you've both had this remarkable success out of the gate. The first thing I want to know is, how does it feel?
Hopefully you can hear me. I would actually say it feels very not real. But I don't know exactly when your book deal was, but mine was like June of 2020, so everything felt super surreal, and each thing kept happening, and I was like, okay, that's real. So it probably won't fully register until after the fact, when people come up to you and say something like about Edgar Awards or something, and you're like, oh, okay, like that happened. That's good, but then you are really anxious about the next thing, whatever that is.
Yeah, I will add, as a writer, you're working alone, you're in solitude, and so you're sitting there writing your book, chipping away, and thinking to yourself, is anyone going to read this? Is this going to resonate with anyone? So I think the thing that I'm very grateful just that the book is finding readers and has brought a lot of people into my life, readers and other writers, but like Vera said, the way, our minds work is constantly, okay, what's next? Right. That's good, but what's coming up?
Right. Yeah, I know that publishing a book can be a surreal experience alone, and then to do it in the middle of a pandemic is super surreal, so congratulations, and I'll pinch you if you want, but it's all happening. So Vera, your book it features, I think, one of the freshest protagonists that I've read in a long time. You have 7 psychopaths who are getting a free ride to a fictional DC university, and you delve into this world of psychopaths. I'm wondering, how did you come to that idea, and how did you make this character, your main character, Chloe, so interesting and likable despite the fact that she doesn't have any empathy?
I think it was a combination of, well, I'm a true crime fan, so I've always been interested in like serial killers and that kind of thing. And in my background in psychology, I've always been interested in psychopathy because the way the mind of a psychopath works is completely different. Like, they don't feel guilt or empathy, and they're also really like narcissistic. So I think I wrote the book because I was kind of frustrated where in mysteries where like the main female character was kind of like hapless and like lacking in basic reasoning skills or agency. So I wanted to write a really agentic, intelligent character who wanted something. And then I wanted to basically create this awful person that readers would find themselves against their will, like really drawn to and like maybe even root for. And I think she is a terrible person, but she's still super charming because it's exciting to see her do what she's doing. You kind of want her to do it. She wants to kill someone. But also she's funny, and it's really hard to dislike people who are funny. So yeah, as I was writing her, I didn't intend for her to be funny, but it just kind of came out because she's judgmental. So therefore she's snarky. So it kind of came that way.
And I think it's also funny just seeing this girl try to be this normal college student when she's not kind of processing it the same way that, a normal student would. So there's that element of humor there. And also, I think it helps that the person she's trying to kill is a bad guy.
Terrible human being.
Yeah, so you're kind of rooting for that in this sort of vengeance way. Yeah. Actually, your book has been described as a mashup of The Breakfast Club and Pretty Little Liars, two of everybody's favorites. And your protagonist is Jessica Miller, this beautiful woman who seems to have this perfect life. She's the youngest woman ever to be named a partner in her consulting firm, and she's got this great wardrobe, this great apartment, but she is just tortured on the inside by her past and by insecurities. How did you go about creating this character?
Yeah, Jessica would be thrilled to hear you call her beautiful and successful because she's trying real hard. Jessica is the heart of In My Dreams. For me, she came to me first, this character, and then everything else, plot, setting, was all second as I've tried to figure out, what is this woman going to do and how. But I started imagining Jessica in full honesty at a very emotionally low point in my life. It was a moment when I had experienced really profound failure in my writing career. And despite trying for many years, one more knock and I kind of was grappling with this thought that maybe I should just throw in the towel as a writer, and it just wasn't going to happen for me. And I was just going to have to get used to that. And so I was thinking about that, and as writers do, you kind of can't help where your imagination picks up and starts going. And of course, so my brain was like, we could throw in the towel. Or what would a woman look like who absolutely refused to do that? Like, what would someone look like who refused to abide, wouldn't abide failure, was going to do whatever it took to force the world to see her the way that she sees herself. And what kind of dark things would she do? What lengths would she go to make the world recognize her? So Jessica just kind of sprung into my mind from those sort of hypotheticals.
Yeah, and I found both of your protagonists to be just so sympathetic and relatable because they've got these things that are driving them. They've got, the pressure we all feel as women to kind of be perfect and present this face to the world, but they've got these demons they're dealing with inside. they also have these flaws, and you guys both kind of step close to the line of making them unlikable, which is something that we as authors talk about a lot. How close can your protagonist be to being unlikable? Can they be unlikable? How did you guys approach that? Including the flaws, but will readers like them?
I think for me, the likability was irrelevant. I wanted to write a person, and the person is who they are. And if the author, there are some readers who want characters to be their friends, and that's very strange to me because the best moral person is not an interesting person. I think this is why the ratings of my book are very polarized, because some people are like, these are bad people. Like, yes, they're psychopaths. I think that the more interesting thing is okay, how do you write a really smart character, but you don't want them to be like Miss Perfect who has every single skill. So a major flaw of hers is, one, she's not capable of feeling fear. So how do you go about a world that's dangerous without getting killed if you don't feel fear, if fear is a survival instinct? So that's one. The second is that she assumes she's smarter than everyone, which is a major blind spot. I think there's a line in the book about, I don't have a lot of flaws, but a complete lack of humility is one of them, which was a joke, but it's also true. Being humble is something that keeps you, safe and, in a social network. So that was something that I had to be. She's also impulsive, which is part of psychopathy. So if you're trying to do this careful plan to kill someone without getting caught, and you're really impulsive and can't control your baser instincts, that kind of becomes a problem for her a few times in the book.
Yeah, I would say I wrote Jessica for her unlikability. That was why I wanted to write her as a character. It was very intentional on my part, and Jessica wrestles with her unlikability throughout the entire book. So she's trying, she recognizes that there are parts of her that are unlikable. And, by the way, that's her ambition and her desire to get ahead, which I would argue aren't necessarily unlikable, but tend to be a little bit when women exhibit those, those qualities. So anyway, Jessica is if there's anything that unravels her and makes her break bad more than anything else, it's her wrestling with her unlikability and her constant attempts to sublimate what is unlikable about her and put on a likable exterior. And so that was kind of my wrestling with that and kind of meta commentary about women and how we do that. So when readers also say about Jessica, oh, this is a really unlikable person, I'm like, yes, exactly. That is the point. That is what the book is about.
Right. I mean, we write murder mysteries, so.
Right. Yeah.
And now I'm going to ask you a question that gets asked to me a lot, and I think as debut novelists, a lot of us take the elements from our own life. They say, write what you know, right? So debut authors very often are mining their own lives for bits and pieces. I was a sex crimes prosecutor, so my character, Anna Curtis, who's a series character, is a fictional sex crimes prosecutor in the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. So I'm always asked, how much of Anna is you? So I'm going to turn that question to you guys and ask, Ashley, how much of Jessica is you? I noticed that she goes to this elite Southern university. You went to Vanderbilt. So what else is there? What did you take? What is not you?
Yeah, my first disclaimer when I'm attending book club meetings and other things is to say, I am not Jessica Miller. And I know that I've convinced people finally when they stop side-eyeing me and, giving me a face. But, as you said, I actually can't write because I've written a few books now, and I cannot flow in my writing until I've figured out what piece of me I am putting in the book. And so finding that personal inroad, and with Jessica, I've already confessed to this, so I'll just lean into it, but I kind of carved out fear of failure, desire to be important, all these things that as humans we, fear of smallness, that we wrestle with, and put that in Jessica and the other characters as well. And then gleefully and shamelessly also pillaged Vanderbilt and my undergrad experience for that Southern Ivy kind of college setting.
Yeah, and I like how you had, she is thinking of herself in this dichotomy. She's like old Jessica, new Jessica, extraordinary Jessica, mediocre Jessica.
She cannot figure out who she is, and she's looking at other people to tell her.
Yeah. And now, Vera, you have this amazing background in psychology. You studied social psychology. You've got these clinician characters who are kind of delving into what your area of expertise is, and obviously you've got these psychopaths who are all, no spoilers here, but they start perhaps killing each other on campus. How did you mine your own past for your characters?
So you'll see, the book is about a clinical panel study at the university where the 7 psychopaths go. So there's a psychology department, and I spent a lot of time in a psychology department. And there's a professor and his graduate student, and that is a relationship I'm really familiar with, and what is that like? There's also a lot of experiments that the 7 psychopaths have to do in the book that are actually very classic social psychology things. If you've ever taken a class, you'll recognize them right away. So I think my background was more in studying politics and things like how do you measure things. But because of my background, I was able to consume a lot of information that was not written for a general audience about psychopathy, so I could kind of make sure that this was an accurate representation, not just like a sensationalistic representation. But I mean, if anyone is questioning, there's none of me in this book. I don't have psychopathy. I don't really do autofiction. Where you can see me, I think, is in the humor and social commentary. And there's kind of, even if it's done in kind of a oblique way, there's kind of commentary about sexual politics and violence and racism, the things that kids are talking about on campus now. There's a backdrop of there being a lot of protest in DC without explicitly saying what they are. Just this sort of turmoil that kids that are in college now, well, before COVID, were dealing with.
Right. Did you work with psychopaths in your professional capacity?
No, it's actually, a bunch of my friends were clinicians. It's pretty uncommon to come across one. It's more likely that someone ends up in therapy not because they're a psychopath or have antisocial personality disorder, because those people don't go to therapy because they don't think something's wrong with them. So you'll see them in therapy if their spouse drags them. And it's why is my marriage not working? Because you're married to a psychopath. Or they're ordered to go to therapy or something. They're not coming in being why is my life a complete disaster and everyone leaves me? So it's usually so it's very uncommon. If I know a friend who's a clinician, they might have had one who they kind of think might be, but it's not that common.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, one thing all 3 of us have done is we've written books that take place in a fictional university. I have a Tower University. It's kind of loosely based on my alma mater, Michigan State. You guys each have these fictional universities. Yours is in D.C., yours is in the South. Why a fictional one? Why not Vanderbilt? Why not Georgetown?
I didn't want to get in trouble. And I thought also, if I make it fictional, then none of my college friends will be reading this text trying to figure out who they are in the book. That they still did that. I still get texts all the time. But no, I was determined to write a college setting. First of all, as a reader, I'm obsessed with campus novels. I didn't realize at the time that I was writing in my dreams, in fairly isolation, that I was writing a dark academic novel like every other thriller thriller writer that year. But I just think it's like a modern take on a locked room sort of setting. So you've got this closed campus. You have all of these people who would probably, their lives wouldn't normally intersect, thrown together. And college is a time when emotions are high. It's a time when people are figuring out who they are. There's alcohol, there's parties. Like, it creates the perfect set of high stakes. So I was really drawn to that setting for that.
What about you, Vera?
Yeah, my book takes place at John Adams University in D.C., which is clearly a play on George Washington University,
Right.
where I went to school. And I didn't want to set it at GW because I wanted to create what the college would be exactly in my mind. It was sort of a mishmash of the way GW looks and this fictional place. And place is really important to me. And like, I drew maps and stuff. The thing that's interesting about GW is that it's in the city, but it's still a campus where it feels like insular. And like, similarly, I like the like locker room feel of like a campus where it's like a closed location. Everyone's forced to interact with each other. And I think a lot of people are nostalgic for college and that whole like dorm room and like frat parties and that kind of like nonsense, and also being of an age where you're so earnest but also figuring out your identity and like trying to figure out what you want to do for a living. And it's just, I mean, I could read like a million college novels. Like, I can never get enough of them. And if you were ever a fan of Veronica Mars, like season 3 was in college, and I was like, I could just stay here forever with her, and then the show got canceled.
Right. Well, I chose the college setting myself because as a sex crimes prosecutor, like sex crimes is such a major thing in college. 1 in 5 girls will be sexually assaulted by the time they graduate from college. And so that seemed like something I needed to take on, kind of head on. And it's something, and now we didn't actually prepare, I don't know if you guys want to talk about this element or not, but you guys touch on this too in your books. And I think this is a kind of a major part of every woman's life, and it's kind of a fear we all kind of carry with us from the time we're kids and we're kind of warned about, particularly in college. And I just wonder if you want to talk about kind of that angle, how you decided to, how to approach that particular danger, that fear for women in that setting.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, I'm pretty open about this, just because I think, to borrow from Selena Gomez, who recently said, mentioning, I think she said something like, mentioning something is like making it addressable and solvable. So, I knew that part of Jessica's experience at college would be with, with sexual assault. And I came to that, I think, from a really real place. I don't know if other women have had this experience, but as you age, reflecting back on your college experience or younger years and thinking, with everything I know now, wow, some of those encounters I had look really suspect. And they look very different now. And that is both like it's a painful thing. And so much of In My Dreams, it is about like the nostalgia and a group of people going back to college and confronting what happened 10 years ago, who they were 10 years ago, and seeing it in a different light. And so I knew that was, I guess, an experience from my own life that I wanted to process, I guess, through fiction.
Right. Yeah.
I think my book is very explicitly about female rage and impotence that we feel about these specific issues. I did the first major rewrite during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, which, regardless of how you feel about him, there was a lot of talk about sexual assault and women walking around that week feeling like angry and impotent and no one's listening to me. And I think part of the reason that women glom on to Chloe is that she's like, I'm going to do something about it. And I have a 27-point plan and I will succeed.
Yeah, it's kind of this female fantasy.
Yeah, it is. It's a revenge fantasy in some ways. And like nobody is rooting for the victim to avoid being killed here.
Right. It's like, go get Will Bachman.
And I deliberately, like, Will Bachman is not a mega genius, like, Ted Bundy type. He's a very banal type of person who did something wrong, who, if he had gone, I was thinking of Brock Turner when I wrote him. Yeah. That if he went to court, his parents would be like, he's a good boy. Mm-hmm. I just had this feeling, like, what if Brock Turner's parents were in the audience? Okay, sorry. like that is the type of like day-to-day, awful thing that happens all the time. And I was like, that happens all the time, but like once in a million times if that happens and you pick the wrong victim,
Yeah, that's a great what if, and that plays out there. I wonder too, you're from DC, so it makes sense to set things here, but is DC a particularly good place for a psychopath to blend in?
I also study politics. The reason I set the book in DC, well, like I love DC. I've lived there for almost 20 years. A lot of books that take place there, are about politics, and like people don't even know that normal people live there and just like go about their day-to-day lives. And I've also read a lot of books that take place in DC or in other cities I live in that are not where all the characters are white when the city is dramatically diverse. So, there's some diversity in the book, and they talk about some of these racial issues. So I just kind of wanted a more like, this is actually like kind of what it's like to live there.
Yeah. Right. Ashley, you actually studied writing before you took a crack at it, unlike me. I came at it from the legal side, and you studied it, and you got this very prestigious degree in American literature from Southern Methodist. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how both that very disciplined approach to this craft and how doing that in the South has influenced your writing.
Yeah, it was a stumbling block, I think. It was an obstacle. It took me a long time to be able to unwind 6 years of a PhD program and looking at books from that kind of more analytical perspective to be able to find my own voice and write. For me at least, they're very different parts of the brain. And when I find myself slipping into PhD voice when I write, I'm like, okay, nope, let's back up, let's erase. But I will say it gave me fascinating insight into academia, and I think there's probably another novel somewhere in the future about like the inner workings of academia. But I will say that it was more my undergrad experience that informed in my dreams. Going to a school that labeled itself the Harvard of the South, much like 15 other Southern-based, universities, and what I felt there and have since observed since is like I really wanted to capture that feeling of going to a school like Wake Forest or Vanderbilt or Duke, and that chip on the shoulder feeling, that like second best, not an Ivy, because I felt like that was just the perfect setting to mirror the psychology and what's going on in the heads of all of the characters, who are, of course, very obsessed with hierarchy, status, and their fear of being second best.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got my signal that we've got 5 minutes until we open the floor to questions. We'll have 10 minutes for questions at the end, so if you got questions, get them ready. We'll get to them in 5 minutes. So I think this might be my last question to you guys. I'm just curious about your process. In my experience, writers are either pantsers or plotters. See, either right by the seat of their pants, you kind of have an idea, you know what your characters are, and you kind of and it comes to you, and it's this magical process. Or you're like me, I'm a lawyer, so everything's an outline, and everything is very, like, I know the end before I know the beginning, and it's a chess game for me of setting up the characters and putting out the clues, and it's right for writing a mystery is very almost like a mathematical puzzle to give the reader that experience. So I'm wondering, for you guys, how is your process, and when do you? I know you also are writing around day jobs. So, what's your process? How do you find time?
I am currently in search of a new process because the one that I've used to write my previous books is no longer working for me. So I'm going to take a stab at maybe pantsing and see what it's about. But normally my process is about sounds as methodical as yours, Allison. Just very, very detailed outlines. 42-page outlines where I'm just trying to write as much as I possibly can. I actually have to plot out the entire book before I can start writing it. And for In My Dreams, I was the most methodical in that I took my outline, printed it, taped it on the wall of my office, color-coded all of the different plot lines because I wanted to be able to see like the rainbow of plot lines intersecting to make sure that I was, doing it all evenly.
I've done that too with the different color cards to represent a different plot line. Yeah, you both have these very complicated plots, which are very hard for a debut novelist to take on. So hat tip to both of you for those mechanisms. Vera, how about you? What's your process?
Yeah, I use a really detailed outline, and I pretty much plot. I know the ending before I start writing. Writing doesn't mean sitting down and typing. Writing for me could be like I'm thinking about something while I'm weightlifting or like walking or showering. I use an extremely detailed plot line because I sometimes only have an hour to write, like after work, before the gym. Most of this book was written between 6 and 7 p.m. on weekdays. And like my current book, which is like much larger, the outline I wrote is like 40,000 words. It's like super detailed.
Wow.
I need to figure everything out because it's complicated. There's multiple POVs. And I don't really understand pantsing. It's sort of like building a house without a blueprint. And then that's why you have to do serious rewriting because your structure didn't make sense. So I feel like you need that skeleton there, and you can kind of move things around, but like you need like a backbone.
Yeah. Now for my first couple books, I was still working at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I would get up at 5, I would write till 7, and I would turn my Wi-Fi off, turn my phone off. That was my time, and that's my advice. If any of you are thinking of writing a novel, take give yourself 2 hours a day and make it sacred. Turn everything off. Tell your kids not to knock, and that is your time. That is your promise to yourself. How did you guys fit it in, and what's your advice to other people who are thinking of writing novels, getting their story out there?
I would say figure out what works for you. What works for you might be different than other people. Waking up early, especially if you have kids, that might be a thing. I would say you don't have to kill yourself to do something, and people always make it seem like you can only do it if you sacrifice everything. I don't think that's true. You just need to be really efficient.
No, I sacrificed everything, Vera.
You just need to be really efficient with the time that you have and not spend a lot of time being oh, I'm a writer. No, sit down and type.
Right.
That's the only way to actually be a writer is to write, and a lot of people struggle with that, the latter part.
Yeah, I wrote Dreams in from probably 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. after day job work, and then as much as I could on the weekends. So completely agree. Just it's about sitting down and making it work, and blocking websites on your computer that tempt you to spend time on them. And I think it helps if you treat your story, if you're really in love and engaged with the story you're telling, you find yourself dreaming all day of the moment that you're going to crack open the Word doc and get back to it. So that kind of helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I find also that writing a novel is very similar in some ways that people don't think, but it's like digging a ditch. People think a lot of it is inspiration, but a lot of it is just get down there and shovel the dirt. That day, just make some of it happen, and you just have to do it a little bit every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, I think it is time to open the floor for questions. So, we have our first brave soul.
Thanks, this is totally inspiring. I have friends that are writers. I'd love if you guys would each maybe say why you do it. What's your motivation? Is it interesting?
The mic is mine.
Why do you do it? What's the motivation? Are you aiming for? Are you looking to entertain yourself? Did you watch a lot of Scooby-Doo when you were little?
I think writing is something you fall into if you read a lot, but not all readers turn into writers. I think writers are often people that read things and are well, I don't know, I kind of would have liked it if X, and for me it was, I kind of would have liked it if we had a smarter female protagonist. I think a lot of writers probably spent a lot of time daydreaming as kids and like being bored, to be honest, in school. School was so boring. Stay in school. Get a PhD.
Yeah. Do 10 years of it. Yeah, I will say I have a much more dramatic drama queen answer, but just that I felt like this incredible urge to take what I was feeling and thinking and put it on the page, whether or not anyone would ever look at it. In fact, I started writing this telling myself no one would ever see it, and that's how I was brave enough to put some of the darkest and ugliest things that were in my head on the page. So, it's still an interesting experience to have it be out in the world. And but yeah, I think it was just like this need. It was going to come out somehow. And
Yeah, they say that publishing a novel is like walking down the street in your underpants.
Yes.
So much yourself is out there, so it does take a certain kind of either bravery or blinders or just courage.
Mix of all of that. Yeah.
All of that, yeah. And what I started with was I was a big reader, just like Vera said, but I also was in this crazy, intense job, and I was processing. On my desk every day were the worst things that happened to human beings, and I think for me, writing was cheaper than therapy.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes. Just raise your hand. There we go. Man,
Hey.
in the back row.
I was just curious what it was like. I know you released a romance book recently. Oh, sorry. I was just wondering what it was like writing two different genres. Your first book was a thriller, and then your second one's a romance. Was there a different strategy you went about writing, or was it the same strategy, just different plots and points? I was just curious.
That's a great question.
I love that. Yes, so I did put out a romance in April, and I thought to myself, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a really likable character, and she will, it'll be sunshine and happy endings. And then that has not been it turns out that I'm incapable of writing likable women. And so the reviews have assured me of that, the reader reception. But yeah, no, I had a lot of time between when I sold In My Dreams and when it came out. I actually wrote 2 books, waiting for Dreams to come out and trying to channel all my anxiety and nerves. And so I started writing my romance in March 2020 when the world shut down. And I realized that I needed, if I leaned into my darkness and fear of failure with Dreams, that was cathartic in one way, but I needed to repair my relationship with the world, I guess, in a way. I needed to write a book in which, it was a comedy, so everything was going to be okay in the end. And that was really important for me. I guess all my books are self-soothing projects. I'm hearing now as I say this out loud. But I used the exact same method, which, like I said, is just now failing me. But one thing I did differently with Fool Me Once is just read the entire thing out loud to my sister to try to get that comedy right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What a great idea. Yeah, that actually, are there more questions? Yes.
What's next?
Yeah, good question. What's next?
I'm working on a bigger book it's sort of an homage to Stephen King's It. It's not really a horror novel.
Nice.
It's about a group of high school kids in a small former mining town where there's a giant megachurch, and there's a mass murder attached to the megachurch, and they are investigating it. They end up killing the charismatic pastor, and then they have to return back to that town 20 years later because even though they killed him, he is still somehow alive.
All right. Sounds fascinating.
Okay, cannot wait for that. I have a thriller coming out in August called The Last Housewife, and it is, I describe it as my cult revenge thriller. So it is a little bit Eyes Wide Shut meets Promising Young Woman, if you can kind of mash those together. So I go back to college for a little while, and then kind of explode into the world of cults after that. So
Nice. This one.
Do you need to do your own marketing, or do publishers do all that?
I'm going to repeat that for our camera. Do we do our own marketing, or do our publishers do that?
So there's marketing is different than publicity. So like you're probably thinking of publicity. So the marketing is more like them buying your publisher buying ad space on Amazon or something. Publicity is like events like this. So when you go with a big five, they're going to do the marketing. You're expected to do some amount of publicity, and kind of everyone has their own gauge of how much they can physically do. And also our books came out during the pandemic, so a lot of it was via Zoom or, podcasts, that type of thing.
I'll just say, thank God, no, because I would be terrible. Those are completely different skills. So luckily, your publisher is the one, if you're fortunate enough, of course, your publisher is out there doing marketing and looking for opportunities on your behalf. And you just have to, if you're an introverted writer like me, just kind of psych yourself up for everything. And that's what you're responsible for.
Yeah, they are. They're such different skills. The writing is so solitary and it's so internal. And then the marketing, in my experience, it's generally hybrid. Your publisher will do some for you, and you can do as much or as little as you want. And how bad do you want it? So I wanted it bad. So I did a lot. I started blogging. That's how I became a TV critic. I started blogging about what TV crime dramas were getting right and wrong. Not because I needed more writing to do, but because it drew so many eyeballs. It made a big bang, and I actually really grew my platform through that. So, but that was a lot of work. So
I think there's being a writer and an author, and then there's being a published author, where you sort of have to be a PR person, a business person managing your own money and paying taxes, a networking, and those are different skill set. You could be a really good writer and be terrible at all the other things.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yes, I was like, what do you mean? What? Public, taxes, public speaking.
I know. My publisher was like, you need to get a Facebook account. I was like, no, not a Facebook account.
Yes.
That totally different stuff. Yeah. How are we doing on time, Ava? Oh, 7 minutes. Okay, great. I saw
7
another hand
minutes,
over here.
and the
Miriam.
mic is live. And I shouldn't do that.
Right. Thank you. So part of the reading a thriller is the dead ends where you think somebody else did it. Are those plotted out, or do you just try out what other people might do to make us think that they're the ones who did it?
Yeah, I think the inclusion of red herrings is kind of the problem with writing a mystery is that some readers approach it from the perspective of so desperately wanting to know who did it that they suspect everyone, and then that can lead to different feelings about whether or not it's that person. For me, it's the answer to the mystery is less interesting than how the characters solve it. So yes, there's red herrings, and there's you can suspect everyone in my book. And you're sort of supposed to, and I'll put in little things that well, this frat guy is way too nice. He's probably a murderer. So I know that they're going to think that way, so I'll put that stuff there on purpose.
That is good life advice also. My plotting, I was very purposefully trying to make readers believe everyone was a potential killer. And so that was meticulously plotted in advance, and as I was writing it, I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna convince, there's a lot of really sophisticated readers who've read a lot of mysteries and thrillers. They're probably really good at ferreting out who did it. I have a lot of twist pressure, I feel, in my head, Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, to your point, Vera, even if someone figures out who is the killer, it's that why that is the thing that is so satisfying, and what you're ultimately reading the book for is the explanation of what the motivation was. At least I am as a reader. And so I thought in my heart that even if someone guessed who my killer was, they wouldn't guess why. So that's kind of, yeah.
There, okay. I'm on my way with the mic, and let's hear a little thank you to the audio-visual crew who made this all so smooth.
I have a question about how you process things. Like, you know, there are a lot of people who will write a book that has this character talking one chapter, then another character is introduced and it's his thoughts and another character. And other people do a book that's, I guess it's sequential, and the whole storyline goes like that. How do you as a writer determine an avenue that works for you for that book? Do you run through different thoughts? I mean, do they teach that in school? Like things? Or if you don't go to writing school, how do you know that?
Intuition. I love that question, first of all, and I think about it for a long time with each new book, how to tell this story. With Dreams, I felt like I was pulling out a lot of tricks, and a little bit it was planned. It's told in dual timelines, so past and present, and it is mostly told from Jessica Miller, the protagonist's point of view. But as I was writing, I realized that there were some things that Jessica just did not know and could not know that I needed to put. And so I wrote myself into a corner and realized that I needed to do a multi-POV book. And so I have a few chapters, very sparse, from other people's point of view. And I realized that those POV moments would be confessions. And so that's it totally did, yeah.
My book is multiple POV, where there's a first-person narrator, which is Chloe, and then there's other narrators, and then when other psychopaths are introduced, they get to be third-person POV. And I did that on purpose because I am really an old-fashioned writer. I don't like when the writer like tricks you, and that's how the mystery works. So I wanted the withholding of clues to be based on, well, we don't have this person's POV yet, and then once we do, we get more information. But also, when you switch out of Chloe's POV into her therapist POV, you get to see how he sees her, and then how she represents herself and how it comes off. So these are all people who are constantly manipulating each other and have different motivations. So the different POVs, you get to see them, each character, from like a three-dimensional perspective by looking at them through the eyes of other characters.
I think we have time for one more question, if we have one more question. And if we don't, I have a question for you guys. So Ashley, you kind of mentioned reading reviews, and you mentioned that you're writing to an audience. You're with a reader in mind. And I'm wondering, how has your experience been getting the feedback of reviews, both professional reviews and reviews that people write on Amazon, on Goodreads, those sort of things?
Yeah, I was very eager and thrust myself into like the world of Bookstagram and engaging with readers and reading a lot of reviews, I think, early after the book was published. And I realized how detrimental and unhealthy that was, even if the reviews were positive, because it was just too many voices in my head. And I lived day to day with, the unnamed person, reader. So I've blocked pretty much all review sites. Don't go. I still engage a little bit on Bookstagram, but I've had to learn.
You actually used your blocking software.
Yes.
Wow, good for you.
I just had to learn, and I think every writer will be different. And when I talk to 2022 debuts, and I tell them just don't go there, don't look, and they're like, okay, but I have to. So I think it's just a journey everyone has to go through on their own.
I had a reviewer last week accuse me of believing in eugenics.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
sure where they got that. It's wrong. I think that my personal theory is that when someone writes a super harsh review of you, it's because they wanted to be a writer and they're angry that your bad book got published and theirs didn't. But I think that you have to the audience you should be imagine the best possible reader that loves your work. That is the audience you're writing for, not the person who thinks that I believe in eugenics.
Yeah, agreed.
So you end up being paralyzed if you're thinking about, in real life, you don't want to be friends with every single person. There's at least 5 people out of 100 who you would hate. You don't want to write to those people. You want to write to the readers who are like you.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, as as a writer myself, reading your guys' books, you are awesome writers. I loved both of your books, and you guys should all buy them. These are stars. So thank you.